Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about being an English teacher in Japan. So, a lot of people take this route when they're trying to move to Japan, be it long-term or short-term. People, a lot of foreigners always try to teach English as their way of getting their entry visa into Japan, and that's mostly for Americans, because I think in the UK, France, some other European countries, you can do a working visa, some sort of visa where it's a lot easier. It takes about like 2 weeks. And you don't need a company to sponsor you, but as an American, and for all other Americans, you have to get sponsored by a company before you can move to Japan. Really, before you can get on a plane and come here, because Japan's immigration policies are very strict. I realized what most people were thinking, and what I was thinking too, before I came here, is how is it teaching English in Japan? And I remember when I was figuring out what to do, how to get back here, that I was on YouTube looking at a lot of these videos. So I'm just gonna try to touch on some of the things that are not mentioned in some of the other videos. So yeah, let's jump into it. So I've got 4 major points. So point number 1 is Japanese level and getting things set up. So this is all assuming that you've contacted and been accepted by a Japanese school or Japanese teaching school. And actually, so let me talk to you guys about the 2 types of positions you can have as an English teacher in Japan. So the first is an ALT. So an ALT stands for Assistant Learning Teacher. So as an Assistant Learning Teacher, because Japan, the Japanese government really wants their Japanese citizens to be able to speak English well, so now they've started this program where in high schools and middle schools in Japan, in English classes, in addition to the regular Japanese teacher, they have foreigners in there to kind of help facilitate a real, native English speaker, facilitate that environment. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 is teaching for what's called an Eikaiwa, and an Eikaiwa is a conversational school. And yeah, a lot of you have probably heard of the JET program. So the JET program is more of an ALT position. Personally, I work for an Eikaiwa. I'm not going to say which one, but let's just say it's one that is green, has a big G on it. So the thing about my position is that I'm an independent contractor, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So back to point number 1, this is assuming that you accept your job offer and you're coming to Japan. Point number 1 is your Japanese level and getting things set up. So for me personally, my Japanese level is pretty good. It's somewhere between conversational and business. So everything was pretty okay for me, nothing was too difficult, but assuming that maybe you have a very low level of Japanese, or say maybe even you have no level of Japanese, things might be a little harder, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that it's definitely doable. I've got a couple of buddies that just came over to Japan. They started teaching, and their Japanese level is very low, but still they were able to set up their bank account, set up an apartment, get a cell phone contract. And these are all things that would normally require a relatively good level of Japanese, but as a foreigner, if you go into a realtor office, which is called fudosan, so if you go into there, you tell them, oh yeah, I'm a foreigner, my Japanese is very low, hopefully you can go in there with someone else, hopefully a Japanese national. That would definitely help speed up the process. But if you don't, it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to be a little bit of a hassle, but it's definitely doable. So those are the 3 main things that you're going to want to think about: are getting an apartment, setting up a cell phone, and making a bank account. Right. Yeah. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, we want to talk about the job. So let's talk about actually teaching English. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, I've never taught in my life. I don't know if I'm patient enough, or I don't know if I have enough vocabulary to really teach English. I just kind of speak it casually. The reason that people go to Eikaiwa, Japanese people, is to speak with foreigners, to get that experience to really, hear and converse with a native English speaker. So as long as you're a native English speaker, you're going to be okay. Your clients are going to like you, blah, blah, blah. And the actual job of teaching at an Eikaiwa is not hard at all. I mean, taking it relatively, if you work in business, if you've been in college, if you've spent the past 4 years in university, then that is definitely a lot harder than teaching English. So you're totally fine with the job. Okay, so preparation. This is something that's a little bit of a touchy topic because it's not just English teachers, but for regular teachers as well. There's a lot of time spent preparing lessons and going over lessons, kind of reviewing client profiles and catering your lessons towards them. And the thing about that is, if you are like me and you have an independent contractor contract with your company, then you only get paid for the amount of time that you're teaching. So in my case, I teach 40-minute lessons, and I probably spend about 5 minutes of preparation before each of those lessons. So if I teach 10 lessons in a day, that's 50 minutes. That's almost an extra hour that I'm in there working, right? And I don't get paid for it. So that's one thing to consider. Let's talk about the salary. So it's relatively low. You're not going to be living luxuriously or anything. You're going to be living pretty standardly. You're going to be able to pay your bills okay, but you can't live in a big place. You can't go, even though you're in Japan and you want to experience a lot of other places. If you don't have some money saved up from before, it's going to be really difficult for you to take time off, spend money traveling, and you're not making the small amount of money that you do make during the time that you're gone. So it's a little hard to make time and set up a budget for traveling. But if it's not too far and if it's once in a while, yeah, sure, you can do it. And the good part about the Eikaiwa that I'm working at is that the schedule is very flexible, so they don't really hold you to a certain number of days that you work. You can actually, it's really flexible. That's one great thing about it that I really like. You can take time off whenever you want to. So, for example, my mom just told me that she's going to be coming visiting here next month. So I went in and closed a few of my days, and no one said anything about it. So it's that's definitely a plus about working in an Eikaiwa such as the one that I do. Yeah, sorry. One other thing I want to talk about the independent contractor status is that you set your open schedules for the company that I work for. You say, on Saturday I want to go in, I'm going to open 4 slots starting at 9:15, take a 40-minute break, open another 4, take a 40-minute break, and open another 4. And you do this at the beginning of the month before. So if I want to set my schedule for April, I'm going to open up my schedule. I'm going to set it on March 9th, like up until March 9th. So you set your schedule up, and clients can book your schedule online. And yeah, up until, the day, up until the time of the schedule, it can get scheduled on the day of, etc. But sometimes, you can open a schedule for like 12 open lessons, and, 4 of them might be booked. And, this can be really disappointing, and it can seem like a real waste of time because some of the times, I don't know about other APAWAs, but certainly for mine, if I have an open slot, then I have to be in my booth at the starting time of that lesson, just in case up until that point someone books my lesson. So I essentially have to be in there, for the whole 12 slot period, which is about like 8 hours, 9 hours. It's like 9 hours that I'm in there. And, if my lessons don't get booked, I really don't get paid that much for being in there for 9 hours. So that's one thing to consider. Let's move on to point 3. So, you're in Tokyo, and it's really cool. And, even if you're not in Tokyo, you're in Japan. So let's talk about Tokyo. There are a lot of eikaiwa in Tokyo. But let's talk about living in Tokyo. One thing that you might be afraid of is making friends, which is totally understandable. But I think it's an irrational fear, because if you come to Tokyo, there are a lot of different outlets for you that are available to meet people. And this is not only meeting other foreigners, but you can also meet Japanese nationals. So one way is Facebook. So Facebook is also very popular in Japan. So there are a handful of groups. For example, I found one called Tokyo Pub Crawl. It's a group of foreigners and Japanese people that meet every weekend or so, and they just kind of go drinking around the city, and I think it's really cool. I've never gone, but I think it's a really good idea. Meeting new people, I don't think it's a problem. Let's move on to our 4th and final point. So this is overall impressions and advice. I don't really mind being an English teacher. There are some things about it I wish were different. But it's not too bad. It's something you have to do if you want to get in Japan. But I don't see myself being an English teacher, into the future. My main thing is that I don't want to get stuck. So what I mean by this, I don't want to end up being an English teacher for 5 years in Japan, because that's obviously a waste of my time. I just graduated from college and I want to start a career, and let's be real, you can't start a career being an English teacher. It's kind of just something that you do, and you don't gain real experience from it. So if you put that on your resume, it's not going to be something that a company would necessarily hire you for, because you have that experience. So I personally don't want to get stuck in this. So that brings me to my next point, finding work outside of teaching English. So this is basically, it's not that good of a topic. It's something that I don't hear a lot of people in these kinds of videos talking about, is leaving your job as an English teacher before your contract period is up. So for my company, obviously I haven't tried it yet, but I've been thinking about it. I've been looking for other jobs, and from what I've heard, it should be okay as long as I give the company a month's notice in advance. And that's reasonable. That's how most systems work. And I think it's because they have so much turnover that the company is used to it, that they don't really bat an eye about losing one instructor. They recruit so many during the year. Basically, if you don't want to work as an English teacher and you don't have a good grasp on Japanese, then you're probably going to have to go into headhunting. And that's consulting. That's working for a company that has clients as businesses, and the businesses, your clients, want you to, they have open positions like, oh, we just lost our HR manager, can you help us find one? And then you have to go source through all of the profiles and find one and be like, hey, we found this guy, how about him? And you don't get paid unless you successfully place someone. If the company, your client, says, yeah, we like this guy, and they hire him, that's when you get paid. So it's a really competitive industry, and I've found through some interviews that if you work for this kind of industry, if you work as a headhunter, a lot of the people that do really are not, young people. They're not people who, come to Japan to kind of enjoy themselves. They're people that come here just kind of because they like Japan and they want to have a life here. So this is not necessarily a short-term position. A lot of the people that work as headhunters are people that have families here, and they're ready to settle down, and they're willing to put in 10 to 12 hours of their day consulting. I hear it has a really good earning potential, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I'm ready to devote myself so much to work. I'm 23. Yeah. So that's if you don't really have a good grasp of Japanese. But if you do, then certifications in Japan are very important, and especially in the hiring process. So you want to have at least an N2 level of Japanese. That's business level Japanese. That is from the test, the JLPT, the Japanese Language Proficiency Test. So you're going to want to take that test. You're going to want to get an N2 level. And if you get an N2 level, then you should hopefully be able to find something. For me, my Japanese level isn't quite there yet, so it's been a little difficult and I'm still searching. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to tell you guys a little bit about my impressions. I've been here for 4 months and I've been teaching English, and I just wanted to share that with all of you. So obviously, there are probably some things that I forgot about or I didn't talk about in this video, but if there's anything that you guys are wondering about, please feel free to ask me in the comment section, oh, hey, what about this, and I'll definitely make it a point to answer all of those questions. But yeah, long video, but thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, see you later.